Ancient pyramids stand on opposite sides of the world. How could civilizations separated by vast oceans possess such similar knowledge? This video reveals 20 artifacts that prove ancient cultures shared technology and ideas across continents. By the end, you will see a completely new picture of human history, one where our ancestors were part of a global community. We will explore how stone circles in Britain match celestial alignments in the Pacific, and why Egyptian mummies contain plants only found in the Americas. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about the ancient world? For centuries, mainstream history told a story of isolation. The great civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and the Americas were each painted as solitary geniuses, brilliant but alone in their respective corners of the world. Their remarkable similarities were explained away as mere coincidences, the logical outcome of any society reaching a certain level of complexity. This belief in independent invention has been a cornerstone of conventional archaeology. Yet a quiet revolution has been building, fueled by discoveries that simply do not fit this tidy narrative. The central question is this: did cultures on different continents, separated by oceans and continents, invent pyramids, advanced astronomy, and sophisticated writing systems entirely on their own, over and over again? Or was knowledge shared? This debate between independent invention and cultural diffusion is one of the most profound in our understanding of the human past. The independent invention theory suggests that humanity's great leaps were destined to happen everywhere, a natural progression of the human mind. The diffusionist theory, however, proposes that ideas, like seeds, could be carried on the wind and waves, taking root in new lands through contact and exchange. As we explore these 20 artifacts, keep this fundamental puzzle in the back of your mind. The evidence we are about to uncover does not just add a footnote to history. It suggests our ancestors were part of a connected world far earlier than we ever dared to believe, setting the stage for a complete rethinking of our shared past. Our journey begins with a forest of stone giants in ancient Mexico. The Olmec colossal heads are more than just sculptures. They are monumental puzzles carved from single blocks of volcanic basalt, each one a portrait of a powerful individual. With their closed helmets and stern expressions, they seem to guard secrets from a world we have forgotten, but it is their faces that have sparked the most intense debate. These are not the features typically associated with indigenous Mesoamericans. Instead, we see broad, flat noses and full lips, characteristics that some scholars argue bear a striking resemblance to people of African descent. This observation immediately confronts the conventional narrative of an isolated New World. How do we explain these distinct visages staring out from the jungles of Veracruz, crafted over 2,500 years ago? The mystery only deepens when we consider the sheer effort of their creation. The basalt for these heads, some weighing more than 20 tons, was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains. Moving these gargantuan stones dozens of kilometers through swampy terrain without the wheel or pack animals represents a staggering feat of engineering and logistics. It implies a sophisticated society with advanced knowledge of transportation, leverage, and social organization. The artistic skill is equally advanced, appearing suddenly with no clear local predecessors. So we are left with a profound question. Did the Olmec civilization develop in complete isolation, spontaneously producing this unique art and technology? Or were they influenced by visitors who crossed the Atlantic, bringing with them both artistic styles and the engineering knowledge to realize them? The heads offer no easy answers, standing as silent sentinels to a potentially lost chapter of human connection. Their enigmatic gaze seems to point us across the world, toward another ocean and another set of artifacts that challenge our understanding of ancient travel. Across the Pacific and high in the Andes, another artifact whispers of an impossible journey. Nestled near the shores of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, the Fuente Magna bowl is a simple ceramic vessel that holds a secret capable of shattering historical timelines. When you look at its surface, you are not seeing typical Andean patterns. Instead, the bowl is covered in intricate, deliberate markings that look nothing like the art of ancient South America. To the astonishment of researchers, these symbols bear a startling, almost exact resemblance to Proto-Sumerian cuneiform, the earliest writing system from Mesopotamia, a world away. This is not a vague similarity. Specific signs on the bowl match known Sumerian characters for gods, rulers, and sacred concepts. We find depictions of animals and geometric motifs that align perfectly with Mesopotamian religious art, symbols that had no business being on a continent supposedly isolated for millennia. The proposed date for the bowl, around 3000 BCE, makes this connection even more explosive. This was a time when the great civilizations of the ancient world were just beginning to stir. If this artifact is authentic, it means that while the Sumerians were inventing writing in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, someone, perhaps Sumerian explorers or traders, carried that knowledge across vast oceans to the high plains of Bolivia. The implications are staggering. It suggests that transoceanic voyages were not a fantasy of a later age, but a reality of the deep past. This single ceramic bowl challenges the very core of the isolation narrative, forcing us to consider a world where ideas flowed as freely across water as they did across land. And if one artifact can point so compellingly across the Pacific, it stands to reason that others would too, a thread we will soon pick up as we examine another clue from a distant shore. That same mirror-like perfection on stone appears again, thousands of miles from the Olmec heads on the pillars of ancient India. Erected by Emperor Ashoka around 250 BCE, these monumental columns are crowned with intricate animal sculptures and covered in moral edicts. But their most enduring mystery is not what is written on them, but what they are made of. The stone itself possesses a supernaturally smooth finish, a gloss so perfect it resembles liquid glass. This is the legendary Mauryan polish, a technological marvel that has defied rain, sun, and wind for over 2,000 years without fading or losing its brilliant luster. Creating such a finish on hard sandstone and granite is not a simple matter of sanding and buffing. It implies a deep chemical understanding of the stone's surface, a secret recipe for a treatment that essentially fused the outer layer into a permanent, weatherproof seal. For a long time, historians considered this a unique achievement of Indian craftmasters, a pinnacle of lapidary art reached in isolation. Yet this assumption crumbles when we find the exact same polish in the tombs of ancient Egypt, on sarcophagi and statues that gleam as if they were carved yesterday. Even more startling, similar finishes have been identified on rare ceremonial objects from Mesoamerica. The odds of three separate cultures, divided by continents and oceans, independently discovering the identical complex chemical process to achieve this specific, near-indestructible shine are astronomically low. This is not like inventing the wheel or pottery, which are logical developments. This is a specific, high-level technological recipe. So how did this knowledge travel? Could itinerant guilds of master artisans have carried their secrets along the burgeoning Silk Road from India to the West? That might explain the Egyptian connection, but it utterly fails to account for its appearance across the Atlantic Ocean in the Americas. This suggests something far more profound than trade. It points to a shared technological heritage, a common source of advanced stone-working knowledge that predates our current historical records, a legacy left by a forgotten civilization or a network of contact that span the globe. The pillars stand not just as proclamations of peace, but as silent witnesses to a lost science of stone, a science that seamlessly connects to another universal ancient pursuit, the study of the stars. High above the desert sands within a temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor, a stone ceiling captures the eternal dance of the heavens. The Dendera Zodiac is not merely a decoration. It is a sophisticated star chart carved in breathtaking detail, a snapshot of the night sky from over 2,000 years ago. This Egyptian masterpiece shows constellations not as simple patterns, but as figures and symbols, mapping a cosmic order with stunning precision. But its true genius lies in what it reveals about time itself. The positions of the celestial bodies on this circular slab of stone encode a deep understanding of the precession of the equinoxes. This is a grand, slow wobble in the Earth's axis that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete a single cycle. To perceive this requires centuries of meticulous observation, a legacy of astronomical data passed down through countless generations of sky watchers. How could one civilization develop such a long-term cosmic clock in total isolation? The answer might be written in the stars themselves across the world. In ancient Babylon, clay tablets detail a zodiac with eerily similar animal and human figures representing the same bands of the sky. In the Vedas of India, the same cosmic principles emerge, with comparable constellations marking the path of the sun and planets. Even more astonishingly, on the other side of the globe, the Maya of Mesoamerica also tracked the precession with their own complex calendars, their celestial gods and symbols mirroring the functions of those in the Old World. The Bull of Heaven in Babylon is the bull constellation in Dendera and echoes the importance of the bull in Mesoamerican cosmology. These are not random coincidences. This is the grammar of a shared language, a universal system for understanding the cosmos that appears fully formed in cultures separated by impassable geography. It implies that the greatest minds of the ancient world, the priests and astronomers from the Nile to the Indus Valley and beyond, were part of a connected intellectual community. They were comparing notes on the movements of the stars, sharing a cosmic knowledge so vital it transcended every terrestrial boundary. This celestial language, understood by so many, would naturally find its ultimate expression not on temple ceilings or clay tablets, but on a scale that mirrored the heavens themselves, carved into the very landscape of the earth. The heaviest objects ever shaped by human hands lie not in Egypt, but on a sprawling platform in Lebanon. The three colossal stones of the Baalbek trilithon, each weighing over 800 tons, are a silent testament to an engineering prowess that defies simple explanation. Quarried from a site nearly a mile away, these megaliths were lifted and fitted together with a hair's breadth of precision, creating a foundation so stable it has withstood millennia of earthquakes. The sheer logistics are mind-boggling. Moving a single one of these blocks would challenge our modern machinery. How did an ancient culture accomplish this with only ropes, levers, and human labor? The mystery deepens when you cross the Atlantic. High in the Peruvian Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman presents the same impossible puzzle. There, stones weighing over 100 tons are carved into bizarre, interlocking angles, jigsaw pieces of solid rock fitted together without a drop of mortar. The joins are so tight that not even a razor blade can slip between them. At nearby Ollantaytambo, we see the same story, with gigantic rose-colored rhyolite blocks transported across a river valley and up a steep mountain. The techniques are identical to Baalbek, a shared language of megalithic construction spoken by cultures that supposedly never met. this is not a case of similar aesthetics. This is the application of identical advanced physics. It reveals a deep, universal understanding of mass, leverage, and seismic stability. The builders in Lebanon and Peru were not just stacking rocks. They were applying a complex architectural science, a lost school of engineering that knew exactly how to manipulate stone on a gargantuan scale. The existence of this global standard implies a common teacher, a source of knowledge that gifted the world the secrets of moving mountains. And from these monumental feats of brute strength, we find an equally compelling mystery in objects of breathtaking delicacy and precision. The secrets of moving mountains with stone find their parallel in the mastery of metal. In the heart of Delhi, a pillar of iron has defied a fundamental law of nature for over 1,600 years. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, erected during the reign of the Gupta Empire around 400 CE, stands 7 meters tall, a testament to a forgotten pinnacle of science. While ordinary iron would have crumbled to dust centuries ago, this monument shows almost no sign of rust. The secret lies not in magic, but in a profound understanding of chemistry. Ancient Indian metalworkers crafted an alloy with a high phosphorus content and very little sulfur, a specific recipe that, when forged, encouraged the formation of a paper-thin, protective layer on the surface. This passive layer shields the iron beneath from the oxygen and moisture that cause corrosion, a feat of engineering that modern science has only recently come to fully appreciate. But was this knowledge unique to India? Across the world, the Celtic tribes of Europe were producing their own rust-resistant iron artifacts, using similar forging methods that created protective layers on their weapons and tools. Even more remarkably, in the Americas, pre-Columbian cultures like the Moche in Peru were creating intricate gilded copper objects using electrochemical replacement techniques, a complex process that also prevents corrosion. These cultures, separated by vast oceans, all arrived at the same sophisticated conclusion. They were not just beating metal into shape, they were manipulating its very atomic structure, understanding how to coax a protective shield from the material itself. This is not a simple case of multiple discoveries. The precise control over impurities like phosphorus and sulfur, and the specific forging processes point to a specialized, almost alchemical knowledge. Could this recipe have been discovered independently in India, Europe, and the Americas by pure chance? Or does the rust-free pillar stand as evidence of a shared, global school of ancient material science, a network where the secrets of alloys and forging were exchanged across continents? This mastery over the elements, ensuring survival against time itself, makes you wonder what other advanced knowledge was preserved, not in stone or metal, but in the fragile pages of ancient books. From the rust-resistant iron of Delhi, we find a mine of bronze and precision gears recovered from the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. The Antikythera Mechanism, salvaged from a 2,000-year-old Greek shipwreck, is not just an artifact. It is a conceptual leap that should not exist in its time. This intricate assembly of at least 30 precisely cut bronze gears, housed in a wooden case, was an analog computer designed to predict the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. It could forecast eclipses and even track the cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. Its mechanical sophistication would not be matched again until the great astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe. This was not a simple calendar. It was a dynamic model of the cosmos, a universe in a box, operated by turning a hand crank. How could such a complex device appear so suddenly with no clear technological ancestors? It feels like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. The mechanism's existence suggests it was not a one-off miracle, but a product of a much broader scientific tradition, one that has been almost entirely lost to history. We find echoes of this tradition elsewhere. Chinese texts from the same era describe complex armillary spheres and even mechanical carts that use differential gearing, a principle central to the Antikythera device. Later, Islamic scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek astronomical knowledge, creating their own intricate astrolabes and geared calendars. The knowledge embedded in the mechanism, the understanding of lunar cycles, planetary orbits, and mathematical gearing, seems to be a fragment of a shared language of celestial mechanics. This was not a technology that spontaneously erupted in Greece alone. It hints at a network of thinkers, a community of philosopher-engineers whose ideas on modeling the heavens may have flowed along trade routes from the Mediterranean to the Far East and back again. The Antikythera mechanism is a ghost, a single surviving whisper from a world where advanced technological thought was more common than our histories admit. That this device was found on a shipwreck is profoundly telling. It was portable knowledge, an instrument meant to travel, guiding its users not just through time, but perhaps across vast and trackless oceans. The open ocean is a featureless desert of water, yet ancient Polynesian navigators crossed it with the confidence of someone following a well-marked road. Their secret was not a compass or a sextant, but an artifact of beautiful simplicity, the stick chart. These intricate frameworks, constructed from flexible cane and small cowrie shells, look to the untrained eye like abstract sculptures. But they are, in fact, dynamic maps of the sea itself. The curved sticks do not represent land masses. Instead, they map the invisible pathways of the ocean, charting the subtle refraction of swells as they bend around islands, the intersection of major currents, and the specific wave patterns that act as nautical signposts. A shell tied at a junction did not just mark an island's location. It signified the entire marine environment that island created, a disturbance in the rhythm of the sea that a skilled navigator could feel through the hull of his vessel. This was a science of reading the ocean's pulse, a form of knowledge built from generations of observation and daring voyages across thousands of miles. The development of such a nuanced and effective system in the middle of the Pacific seems like a perfect example of isolated genius, yet the core principle resonates powerfully across the globe. The Vikings crossing the North Atlantic used a similar environmental literacy. They watched the flight paths of birds, noted the color of the water, and smelled the air for the scent of distant land, a living map of sensory cues. The Phoenicians, masters of the Mediterranean and beyond, undoubtedly possessed their own sophisticated, unrecorded methods for navigating by stars and currents. Is it truly plausible that these great seafaring cultures, all pushing the boundaries of the known world, never exchanged the foundational ideas that made their journeys possible? The Polynesian stick chart is a testament to a universal human quest. It represents the shared need to understand the sea, not as a barrier but as a highway. This advanced maritime prowess, whether in the Pacific or the Atlantic, opens a tantalizing possibility. If ancient sailors could navigate such vast distances using the language of the waves, then the artifacts they carried with them could have traveled just as far, planting the seeds of technology and belief on distant shores. The silent, linen-wrapped bodies of Egyptian pharaohs were thought to hold only the secrets of the Nile. Then, a scientific analysis delivered a shock that rippled through the world of archaeology. In the 1990s, toxicologist Svetla Balabanova was conducting routine tests on mummies from a dynasty that ruled around 1000 BCE, expecting to find traces of local herbs and resins. Instead, her equipment detected something impossibly out of place: cocaine and nicotine. These are powerful stimulants derived from the coca plant and tobacco, two species that evolved exclusively in the Americas, on a continent separated from Africa by the vast Atlantic Ocean. According to everything we knew, these plants should not have existed in the Old World for another 2,500 years, until after Christopher Columbus' voyages. The immediate reaction was disbelief. Critics argued the results must be contamination from the modern world, or perhaps a misidentification of some unknown African plant. Yet Balabanova's methodology was sound, and the results were replicated on hair, skin, and bone from multiple mummies, all sealed in their tombs for millennia. The evidence was stubbornly, chemically present. This forces a radical question. How did molecules from American plants find their way into the bodies of ancient Egyptian nobility? The most straightforward explanation is also the most revolutionary: direct, sustained trade contact across the Atlantic. We are not talking about a single ship blown off course, but a network robust enough to transport delicate plant materials, a trade in knowledge as much as in goods. The Egyptians were meticulous in their preparations for the afterlife, using only the most sacred and potent substances. The presence of cocaine and nicotine suggests these New World plants were not mere curiosities, but valued commodities, integrated into their highest rituals and medicine. This is not a vague similarity in art or architecture. This is tangible biochemical proof, locked in human tissue, that our map of the ancient world is missing entire oceans of connection. If such perishable goods could cross the world, then ideas, stories, and the very seeds of civilization could have traveled with them. The biochemical proof of transoceanic trade dissolves into the realm of myth, where another universal symbol slithers through the collective imagination of humanity. From the rain-bringing lung of China to the feathered sky serpent Quetzalcoatl of Mesoamerica, and further to the treasure-hoarding worms of European lore, the dragon appears everywhere. This is not a case of vague similarity. The core blueprint is unmistakably consistent: a powerful, serpentine being, often associated with wings or feathers, intimately linked with the primal forces of water, the gift of wisdom, or the very act of creation itself. How can cultures with no conceivable contact all invent a creature with such specific, overlapping traits? Convergent mythology, the idea that similar environments produce similar stories, can explain the presence of a great flood myth. But it struggles to account for the persistent, complex anatomy and symbolic role of the dragon. This feels less like independent invention and more like the scattering of pages from a single, ancient storybook. In China, the dragon was a benevolent celestial force carved from jade and woven into imperial robes. In Central America, Quetzalcoatl was the plumed serpent, a god who brought knowledge and culture to humanity. Across the Atlantic, the Norse Jormungandr was a world-encircling serpent of immense power. These are not just big snakes, they are composite beings, conceptual hybrids that blend the serpent with the bird, marrying the earthly with the divine. The odds of this precise symbolic recipe being cooked up independently in dozens of isolated kitchens are vanishingly small. This points to a shared archetype, a primordial idea so potent it embedded itself deep within the human psyche, perhaps carried out of Africa by the first migrations. Or more tangibly, it suggests a common cultural root, a source civilization or a network of contact so old its history is lost, leaving only this powerful, scaled ghost to haunt our global mythology. The universal reverence for this serpentine form suggests our ancestors were not just trading goods, but the very building blocks of belief, a shared symbolic language that points toward artifacts of even deeper spiritual resonance. Deep in the soil of ancient Mesopotamia, long before the rise of empires, the Ubaid people crafted figures that defy simple explanation. These terracotta statues, dating back over 6,000 years, depict humanoid forms with distinctly reptilian features. They possess elongated conical heads, oversized almond-shaped eyes that seem to stare from another world, and most unsettlingly, a complete absence of mouths. These are not crude attempts at human likeness. They are deliberate, stylized representations of something other, something deeply woven into the spiritual fabric of one of humanity's earliest civilizations. The so-called lizard men of Ubaid stand as a profound artistic mystery. Why would a culture choose to represent its people, or perhaps its gods, in such a specific, non-human form? The answer might be written in clay across the globe. In the prehistoric Jomon period of Japan, artisans created the dogu, small humanoid figurines that share a startling family resemblance. They too have elongated heads, large slanted eyes, and bodies that blend human and animal traits, often covered in strange patterns and designs. Far across the Pacific, the Olmecs, whom we met at the start of our journey, also produced sculptures depicting jaguars, figures with the snarling mouths of big cats fused onto human infants. This is more than a coincidence of style. We see a universal theme emerging, a recurring impulse in the ancient human psyche to bridge the gap between humanity and the animal world. This blending is a hallmark of shamanistic traditions worldwide, where the spiritual journey often involves transformation, taking on the attributes of a power animal to gain its wisdom or strength. The Ubaid lizardman, the Jomon dogu, and the Olmec jaguar all seem to point to a shared spiritual language, a common understanding that the boundaries of the self were fluid and that true power lay in the union of human consciousness with the primal forces of nature. The consistency of this theme, appearing in cultures separated by continents and oceans, suggests these ideas are not just random artistic flourishes. They are the artifacts of a connected spiritual worldview, a primordial understanding of humanity's place in a living, conscious cosmos. This shared symbolic language, etched in clay and stone, would naturally need a framework to govern the societies that believed in it, pointing toward the need for shared principles of law and order. This shared symbolic language, etched in clay and stone, would naturally need a framework to govern the societies that believed in it. The Code of Hammurabi, a towering black stone stele from ancient Babylon, stands as one of humanity's first attempts to carve order from chaos. Dating to around 1754 BCE, its text is more than a list of rules. It is a complete philosophical statement, structured with a prologue that establishes the king's divine right to rule, a detailed body of 282 laws, and a powerful epilogue meant to intimidate future rulers into upholding its decrees. The principle of retributive justice, famously summarized as an eye for an eye, was its guiding light, aiming to replace cycles of blood feud with measured, state-sanctioned punishment. But this was not a solitary spark of genius in Mesopotamia. Centuries later, the Roman Republic would create the 12 Tables, a legal code that, while distinct, shared the same foundational goal of establishing public, written standards to prevent the powerful from arbitrarily interpreting the law. Even the legal principles found within the Mosaic law of the Hebrews contain striking parallels in structure and intent. How do we explain this simultaneous flowering of complex legal philosophy in societies separated by vast distances and centuries? It is one thing for isolated cultures to invent the wheel or pottery. It is another for them to independently arrive at the identical, sophisticated concept of a tripartite legal document, complete with a philosophical justification, specific statutes, and a concluding sanctification. This points to something more profound than parallel development. It suggests a dialogue, an exchange of ideas about the very nature of justice and social order between the ruling elites and priestly classes of the ancient world. These stone stele were not just local ordinances. They were monuments to a shared human realization that for a society to grow beyond a village, it needed a common, immutable set of rules, a covenant between the people and the powers that be, whether divine or royal. The widespread emergence of this idea implies that the seeds of governance itself were carried along trade routes and diplomatic missions, a shared intellectual technology as vital as any metal or tool. This universal drive to codify the rules of life logically extends to the very symbols used to record them, guiding us to consider the bedrock of all complex communication, the invention of writing itself. The impulse to codify law into stone finds its parallel in a more enigmatic form of ancient record-keeping. In a labyrinthine palace on the island of Crete, a single clay disc holds a message that has stubbornly resisted translation for over 3,000 years. The Phaistos disc, fired hard in the 2nd millennium BCE, is a palm-sized enigma. Its surface is a spiral of exquisite, tiny symbols winding from the outer edge toward the center. But these are not hand-carved marks. Each pictograph, from marching men and shaved heads to bees and ships, was stamped into the wet clay with a separate seal, a piece of movable type. This is the real shock. The technology used to create the disc, a form of printing, would not revolutionize human communication until Gutenberg's press in the 15th century. Here it is, a lone, perfected example with no surviving prototypes or successors. It feels like finding a single, flawless microchip in a Roman ruin. The disc's very existence suggests it was not an experiment, but a product of a mature, if lost, information technology. Could this concept of portable, repeatable stamped messages have been known elsewhere? While the disc itself is unique, the underlying principle of imprinting symbols was a global pursuit. Cylinder seals in Mesopotamia rolled intricate designs into clay to mark ownership. Stamp seals were used across the Indus Valley and Egypt. The Phaistos disc takes this universal idea and elevates it to a radical new level, combining dozens of individual type pieces to convey a complex, sequenced narrative. Its isolation is the puzzle. Was it the sole survivor of a Minoan printing tradition, its wooden type long since rotted away, or was it itself an import, a singular message carried from a culture that had mastered this technology, its secret now locked in the disc's silent spiral? This artifact is more than an undeciphered text. It is a fossil of a potential path not taken, a glimpse of an ancient information age that never was, forcing us to wonder what other systems for processing knowledge were developed and lost, guiding our search toward the most universal language of all, the language of numbers. The most profound ideas often begin with a simple mark. Deep in a cave in the Lobombo Mountains, a baboon's fibula bears 29 distinct notches, carefully carved by a human hand 43,000 years ago. Far to the west, at the source of the Nile, the Ishango bone presents an even more complex puzzle. This tool, made from a fibula and topped with a quartz crystal, displays 3 columns of grouped marks. One column lists prime numbers between 10 and 20, while the others seem to demonstrate a method of doubling. These are not random scratches. They are deliberate, organized records, potentially tracking the phases of the moon or the cycles of a woman's body. This was mathematics in its purest, most ancient form, a technology of the mind etched into bone, and this technology was not confined to a single cradle of civilization. From the tally sticks of prehistoric Europe to the knotted quipu strings of the Inca, the fundamental urge to quantify the world is a human universal. The appearance of similar counting systems across continents presents a fascinating choice. Did every culture, from the frozen tundra to the equatorial rainforest, independently invent the same concept of one, two, and many? Or does this point to something embedded even deeper in our shared journey? These bones may be artifacts from a time before the Great Migrations, a portable cognitive toolkit carried by the first humans as they walked out of Africa and populated the world. They are the deep roots of our shared intellectual pursuit, proving that the language of numbers is humanity's first and most enduring common tongue. This foundational understanding of quantity and pattern would inevitably blossom into a far more complex language, the abstract and beautiful realm of sacred geometry. That same universal language of numbers finds its ultimate expression in stone on the Giza Plateau. The Great Pyramid is far more than a tomb. It is a mathematical equation rendered on a colossal scale. Its base forms a near-perfect square, with sides aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15th of a single degree. This is not a rough estimation. It is a feat of precision surveying that would be challenging to replicate today without modern instruments, but the true genius is encoded in its proportions. If you take the pyramid's perimeter and divide it by twice its original height, the result is a figure remarkably close to pi, the mathematical constant defining the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. This is not a vague suggestion. The builders deliberately embedded this fundamental constant into the very fabric of the structure, implying a knowledge of advanced geometry that predates the Greek mathematician Archimedes by over 2,000 years. This architectural code is not unique to Egypt. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the layout of the Pyramid of the Sun and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent is a massive terrestrial map of our solar system, with distances between structures accurately reflecting the spacings between planets. Across the Atlantic, the concentric circles of Stonehenge in England encode geometric relationships and precise astronomical alignments to solstices and eclipses. How do we explain this global phenomenon? It is one thing for cultures to build big. It is another for them to independently discover and then apply the exact same highly abstract mathematical and astronomical principles to their most sacred projects. The odds are vanishingly small. This points not to coincidence but to curriculum. It implies a common source of knowledge, a shared school of sacred geometry understood by a global network of architect priests. These master builders were not just constructing monuments, they were imprinting the laws of the universe onto the landscape, creating a permanent testament to a forgotten science that saw number, star, and stone as parts of a single harmonious whole. This grand architectural language, used to map the cosmos, would naturally be applied to the more intimate scale of charting the human body itself. The silent, orderly streets of Mohenjo-Daro were laid out with a precision that feels almost modern. This was not a city that grew by accident, but one that was meticulously planned before a single brick was laid. Its wide, straight avenues ran in a perfect grid, intersecting at right angles to create uniform city blocks. Every brick, from the grand public baths to the humblest dwelling, conformed to a standardized ratio, a universal building code enforced across the entire Indus Valley civilization. Beneath these orderly streets lay their true genius, a complex city-wide drainage system with covered channels and inspection holes, ensuring waste was efficiently carried away and public health was maintained. This was a society that had mastered urban living over 4,000 years ago. Yet at the very same time, 1,000 miles to the west, the cities of Mesopotamia were being built on startlingly similar principles. In places like and the city of Mari, we find the same grid-like street patterns, the same focus on monumental civic architecture like ziggurats, and remarkably, the same advanced concern for water management through elaborate networks of canals and drains. This is not a vague similarity in aesthetic. This is the shared application of a specific, complex social technology, a blueprint for what it meant to live together in a civilized, advanced community. How could two cultures, separated by vast deserts and mountain ranges, independently invent not just cities, but the identical idea of a planned city, complete with standardized construction, municipal sanitation, and a clear separation of public and private space? The most compelling explanation is that they were in conversation. Traders moving between the Indus and Mesopotamia would have carried more than just goods like Lapis Lazuli and carnelian. They would have exchanged ideas. They would have described the wonders of their home cities, the benefits of straight roads for carts and soldiers, the necessity of clean water and proper drainage for a large population. This was a trade in concepts, a shared vision of governance, public health, and social order that transcended local customs. These ancient urban plans are artifacts of a collective human dream, a universal aspiration for an organized, healthy, and beautiful community. This grand vision for society, etched into the very ground, would naturally be reflected in the smaller, more intimate objects that defined personal identity and status. A single shade of blue connects the tombs of pharaohs to the palaces of Sumerian kings. Lapis lazuli, with its deep celestial hue flecked with golden pyrite, was more than a gemstone to the ancient world. It was a piece of the night sky made solid. This vibrant stone was treasured from the banks of the Nile to the citadels of the Indus Valley, and even into the courts of early China. Yet, for all its widespread reverence, it came from one place and one place only, the remote Sacsayhuamán mines in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. To find an object like the funeral mask of Tutankhamun, inlaid with lapis, is to find a receipt for a journey of thousands of miles, a transaction that crossed deserts, mountains, and cultures. This was not a local trade. The presence of this specific, singularly sourced stone in lands so distant is undeniable proof of intercontinental exchange routes that were operating over 4,000 years ago. But these caravans and ships were not just carrying pretty rocks. They were the internet of the ancient world, transmitting the data of civilization itself. When a Sumerian scribe rolled a cylinder seal carved from lapis to mark a document, he was using a technology and an artistic style that traveled with the stone. The deep blue color became universally associated with divinity and power, a shared symbolic language that said the same thing in Egypt as it did in Mesopotamia. The value placed on this material created a common aesthetic, a thread of cultural consensus woven across continents. The journey of a single lump of lapis lazuli from an Afghan mine to an Egyptian workshop paints a vivid picture of a world already in conversation, a network that did not just exchange goods, but inevitably, the very ideas that kept societies healthy and functioning. A healed human skull from ancient Peru tells a story of both suffering and astonishing skill. This person survived a precise, circular hole being carved into their cranium, the bone later growing smooth around the edges of the opening. This is trepanation, one of the most daring and widespread medical procedures of the ancient world. From the high Andes to the plains of France, and from the villages of prehistoric Russia to the islands of the South Pacific, archaeologists have unearthed skulls bearing the unmistakable marks of this surgery. The practice spans thousands of years and appears in cultures that supposedly had no contact with one another. Why would so many different peoples, in complete isolation, arrive at the same radical idea of opening the human head? The reasons carved into these bones are as complex as the act itself. In some cultures, it was likely a spiritual procedure, an attempt to release evil spirits thought to cause madness or epilepsy. A hole in the skull would provide a doorway for the demon to escape. In other contexts, it was starkly practical, a desperate attempt to relieve pressure from a severe head injury or a fractured skull. The true marvel is not just the idea, but the success. Many of these ancient patients lived for years after their operations, proven by the clear signs of healing on their bone. This means the surgeons possessed a profound, hands-on understanding of anatomy. They knew, through trial and error, which areas of the skull to avoid, how deep to cut, and how to manage the unimaginable risk of infection. They developed specialized tools, from obsidian blades sharper than modern steel to flint scrapers and even early bow drills, all designed for the delicate work of cutting through bone without damaging the fragile brain beneath. The independent invention of something as complex and specific as brain surgery stretches the limits of coincidence. Could it be that this knowledge is far older than we think? A fundamental medical technique carried out of Africa by the very first migrations of modern humans, preserved and refined by their descendants across the globe? Or does the global presence of trepanation point to later, forgotten networks of exchange where the secrets of healing were among the most valued commodities? These skulls are more than medical curiosities. They are evidence of a universal human courage, a shared determination to confront suffering and explore the very seat of consciousness itself. This bold, hands-on approach to understanding the body through direct measurement and intervention logically extends to humanity's desire to measure and standardize the world around them. These small, carefully shaped stones are the building blocks of ancient global commerce. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of meticulously crafted stone cubes. They are not art or tools but weights, and they reveal an economic revolution. The Indus Valley civilization did not have a haphazard system of measurement. Their weights followed a strict repeating standard, a unit of approximately 13.7 grams. If you had one of their standard weights, you could travel to any city in the vast Indus region, from the coast to the foothills, and it would be recognized and accepted without question. This was a monetary system before coinage, a language of value built from stone. But this language was not spoken only in the Indus Valley. At the very same time, the merchants of Mesopotamia were using their own standardized weights based on a unit called the shekel. In Egypt, another system flourished, yet it too was built on principles of mathematical consistency and official sanction. How do we explain this simultaneous emergence of such a specific and complex idea? It is one thing to trade goods, but another to trade the very concept of value itself. The invention of a standardized weight is a profound intellectual leap. It requires a society to agree upon an abstract unit, to trust in an invisible standard, and to enforce its accuracy. For this same concept to appear fully formed in three separate cradles of civilization defies the odds of pure coincidence. This suggests that along with the Lapis Lazuli and the carnelian beads, traders were carrying a more precious cargo, the blueprint for a functioning market economy. They were exchanging the mathematics of fairness, the idea that a transaction should be predictable and just, governed by a rule that transcended any single merchant or king. These humble stone cubes are the silent architects of trust, the foundation upon which empires of trade were built. They prove that our ancestors were not just sharing objects, but the very systems that make complex society possible. And just as they sought to standardize the material world, they turned their gaze upward, striving to impose a similar order upon the cosmos itself. A golden disk gleams from an Egyptian temple wall. This is the Aten, the radiant sun, depicted not as a god in human form but as the pure, life-giving orb itself, its rays ending in tiny hands bestowing blessings upon the pharaoh. On the other side of the world, the Aztec sunstone, a colossal 24-ton monolith, presents a different but no less powerful vision. It is a complex cosmic diagram with the face of the sun god Tanatia at its center, demanding sustenance to keep his daily journey across the sky from ending. Why do we find this same celestial body, the sun, elevated to such supreme importance in every single cradle of civilization? The Egyptian disk, the Aztec stone, the intricate chariot of the sun pulled across the sky in Norse and Greek myth, the detailed prayers to Surya in the Hindu Vedas, these are not just similar observations. They are a shared symbolic language carved into the bedrock of human consciousness. The sun was universally understood as the ultimate source of life, order, and power. Its daily victory over darkness and its annual cycle of death and rebirth became the fundamental story, the meta-narrative for every aspect of existence, from the fate of kings to the success of the harvest. This goes beyond simple worship of a bright light in the sky. The specific recurrence of the disk, the spiral representing its eternal cycle, and the cross symbolizing the four cardinal directions it governs, points to a coordinated understanding of the cosmos. It suggests that the earliest astronomers and priests, whether in the deserts of Egypt or the highlands of Mexico, were not just watching the same sun, they were interpreting its movements through a remarkably similar philosophical and spiritual lens. This global tapestry of solar reverence is the thread that binds all our previous artifacts together. The pyramids aligned to solstices, the zodiacs tracking its path, the golden artifacts that mirror its glow, even the universal laws seeking to impose order as the sun imposes day, all resonate with this single, unifying theme. Our journey through these 20 artifacts reveals a story far grander than isolated genius. It paints a portrait of an ancient world humming with exchange, where ideas flowed as freely as the trade winds. We have seen biochemical evidence in Egyptian mummies, identical engineering miracles in Lebanon and Peru, and shared spiritual archetypes from Mesopotamia to Japan. This collective evidence does not simply suggest occasional contact. It builds an overwhelming case for a deeply interconnected ancient humanity. The independent invention theory struggles under this weight. It is one thing to invent the wheel twice. It is another for cultures to independently develop the same complex chemical recipe for rust-proof iron, the same precise mathematical constant of pi in monumental architecture, and the same specific brain surgery technique. The simplest explanation is often the correct one. These ideas were shared. They were carried across deserts and oceans by intrepid traders, explorers, and migrants, slowly seeding a common foundation of knowledge across the globe. This does not diminish the brilliance of these cultures. Instead, it places them within a vibrant, global network of learning. They were not solitary lights in the dark, but brilliant nodes in a vast, ancient web of human ingenuity. They adapted, refined, and personalized this shared knowledge, creating the magnificent and distinct cultures we study today, but they were building upon a common foundation. The true artifact we have uncovered is not made of stone or metal. It is the enduring pattern of connection itself, a legacy of a time when humanity saw itself as part of a single, curious, and endlessly inventive family, gazing up at the same sun and dreaming the same dreams. 20 scattered clues begin to form a single, undeniable picture. The evidence is no longer a collection of curiosities, but a coherent argument written in stone, metal, and myth. The Olmec heads, the Fuente Magna bowl, the Mauryan polish, the Dendera Zodiac, the megaliths of Baalbek and Sacsayhuaman, the iron pillar, the Antikythera Mechanism, the Polynesian stick charts, the cocaine in the mummies, the global dragon, the Ubaid figures, the legal codes, the Phaistos disc, the Ashango bone, the Great Pyramid's geometry, the planned cities, the Lapis Lazuli trade. Trepanation skulls, the standardized weights, and the universal sun disks. When viewed in isolation, each could be explained away as a strange coincidence or an anomaly. But together, they weave a tapestry of connection that is simply too dense, too intricate, and too consistent to be the product of chance. The theory of complete and total isolation for these great civilizations has collapsed under the weight of its own improbability. How could so many cultures, across such vast spans of time and space, independently invent not just similar ideas, but identical technological recipes, complex spiritual symbols, and advanced scientific principles? The simplest answer is that they did not. Knowledge was a river, not a series of isolated springs. This does not require us to believe in a single, globe-spanning super-civilization or in continuous contact between, say, the pharaohs and the Olmec kings. A more nuanced and powerful model emerges, one of knowledge leapfrogging across generations and landscapes. A technique for rust-proofing iron, perfected in India, could have been carried west by traders to the Celts, and perhaps east by seafarers we have yet to identify, eventually influencing metallurgists in the Andes. The concept of a planned city, born in the Indus Valley, could have traveled to Mesopotamia with a caravan of merchants, its principles adapted and adopted before the blueprint slowly faded from memory in its place of origin. This was not a steady, documented exchange, but a pulse, a slow diffusion of ideas through intermediary cultures, often over centuries. It suggests a world where a master artisan or a learned priest was a treasure as valuable as any gemstone, their skills portable and sought after. This also points to the possibility of a far older common heritage, a foundational layer of knowledge carried out of Africa by the first modern humans. The deep-seated archetypes, the fundamental mathematics etched on bone, the universal drive to understand the stars, these may be the intellectual inheritance from a time before the Great Migrations, a shared cognitive toolkit for building civilization. This revised perspective does not steal glory from the Egyptians, the Maya, or the Sumerians. On the contrary, it amplifies their genius. They were not mere copyists, but brilliant innovators who took received ideas and refined them, adapting them to their unique environments and spiritual beliefs with breathtaking creativity. They were the custodians and enhancers of a shared human legacy. To see the ancient world as interconnected is to see our own history with new eyes. It replaces a narrative of lonely genius with one of collaborative ingenuity. It reveals that the human drive to explore, to trade, and to share understanding is not a modern invention, but a fundamental part of our story, written into the very foundations of our world. 20 scattered clues begin to form a single, undeniable picture. The evidence is no longer a collection of curiosities, but a coherent argument written in stone, metal, and myth. The Olmec heads, the Fuente Magna bowl, the Mauryan polish, the Dendera Zodiac, the megaliths of Baalbek and Sacsayhuaman, the iron pillar, the Antikythera Mechanism, the Polynesian stick charts, the cocaine in the mummies, the global dragon, the Ubaid figures, the legal codes, the Phaistos disc, the Ashango bone, the Great Pyramid's geometry, the planned cities, the Lapis Lazuli trade. Trepanation skulls, the standardized weights, and the universal sun discs. When viewed in isolation, each could be explained away as a strange coincidence or an anomaly. But together, they weave a tapestry of connection that is simply too dense, too intricate, and too consistent to be the product of chance. The theory of complete and total isolation for these great civilizations has collapsed under the weight of its own improbability. How could so many cultures, across such vast spans of time and space, independently invent not just similar ideas, but identical technological recipes, complex spiritual symbols and advanced scientific principles? The simplest answer is that they did not. Knowledge was a river, not a series of isolated springs. This does not require us to believe in a single, globe-spanning super-civilization or in continuous contact between, say, the pharaohs and the Olmec kings. A more nuanced and powerful model emerges, one of knowledge leapfrogging across generations and landscapes. A technique for rust-proofing iron perfected in India could have been carried west by traders to the Celts and perhaps east by seafarers we have yet to identify, eventually influencing metallurgists in the Andes. The concept of a planned city born in the Indus Valley could have traveled to Mesopotamia with a caravan of merchants, its principles adapted and adopted before the blueprint slowly faded from memory in its place of origin. This was not a steady, documented exchange, but a pulse, a slow diffusion of ideas through intermediary cultures, often over centuries. It suggests a world where a master artisan or a learned priest was a treasure as valuable as any gemstone, their skills portable and sought after. This also points to the possibility of a far older common heritage, a foundational layer of knowledge carried out of Africa by the first modern humans. The deep-seated archetypes, the fundamental mathematics etched on bone, the universal drive to understand the stars, these may be the intellectual inheritance from a time before the Great Migrations, a shared cognitive toolkit for building civilization. This revised perspective does not steal glory from the Egyptians, the Maya, or the Sumerians. On the contrary, it amplifies their genius. They were not mere copyists, but brilliant innovators who took received ideas and refined them, adapting them to their unique environments and spiritual beliefs with breathtaking creativity. They were the custodians and enhancers of a shared human legacy. To see the ancient world as interconnected is to see our own history with new eyes. It replaces a narrative of lonely genius with one of collaborative ingenuity. It reveals that the human drive to explore, to trade, and to share understanding is not a modern invention, but a fundamental part of our story, written into the very foundations of